Hey, everybody. Guess who I'm here with? Another person who quit TV news. Yay! Where's the champagne? We should pop it. Actually, Brandi, I don't know. Now that you're in the independent world, you're going to need a sponsor. So I don't know. Maybe I should just pimp my sponsor real fast. AllisonWinePromo.com. Drink wine? Are you drinking more wine now than you were before?
Well, I've this week, no, it's been mostly coffee because, if anybody thinks working independently is easy, it is absolutely not. And I've had very minimal sleep. So lots of coffee this week, but.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. You can also go to twinenginecoffee.com/Allison and get one of my USD certified organic shade grown high altitude Nicaraguan roasts. They have all kinds of varieties and they have a Caturra tea that you should check out made with coffee fruit. But again, if you need something stronger, don't forget to go to AllisonWinePromo.com and get 50% off some of my favorite Malbecs from Argentina, the highest regions, actually one of the oldest vineyards in Argentina and one of the highest altitude vineyards in Argentina. Okay. That's the first time I've ever promoted my sponsors at the beginning. So I feel like this is bound to be one of my best live streams.
I set it up for you. I set you up for it.
You set me up. Thank you. We didn't even talk about that. So I am going to show everybody this video that you just posted before you tell everybody who you are and everything, because I think it gives everyone a very good primer as to why you quit your job is Fox Q13 in Seattle. Is it an O&O or an affiliate?
Yeah, Fox bought us 2 years ago. So we hadn't always been, but about the time the pandemic started, Fox bought us.
Okay, but it was an affiliate before owned by somebody else.
Correct. Tribune Media.
Tribune Media. Okay. And we can talk about that in a second because I think many people don't necessarily understand the difference between an affiliate and an O&O and the difference in control that the ownership company has and all that good stuff. So here we go.
I'm Brandi Kruse, and I just quit my job in corporate media. Here's why. This is one of the most important moments in history for journalism. I mean, a free press was built for a moment like this, a moment where government at all levels is exerting direct and profound power over people's lives. Yet too many in the mainstream media are falling short of their obligations to question that power. It is our job to challenge the prevailing narrative. If not us, then who? So on Friday, I resigned from my job in corporate media. And at the end of the day, my rationale is simple. I no longer believed that I could work for them and also work for you. I no longer believed that I could truly fulfill my obligations to you when I had to balance everything I said and did and wrote against this range of mainstream considerations. So today I am launching an independent show. Undivided is political coverage for the anti-fringe. It is political coverage for those who believe in questioning power, no matter who holds it. It is political coverage that rejects fringe ideologies and doesn't bow to some weird social pressure to pretend as if dumb and dangerous ideas make sense. Undivided is political coverage that judges people based on their actions, not their affiliation. It is political coverage that doesn't take the bait when people act outraged and offended at every little thing. And most importantly, it is political coverage that is honest, even if that honesty might tick you off from time to time. So in closing, let me say this. Yes, I quit my job in corporate media, but I'm not quitting. I am committing. And I cannot do it without you.
I should say I have the link for your Patreon in the description of the video. So if people want to go check you out and support you, that's where to go. Patreon.com/undivided. One question I have for you, Brandi, that I want to get to after you explain everything is this. Who defines fringe and what do you mean by fringe? Because when I watched that video, that was exactly what I was thinking too. I want to ask her what she means by that. But before we get to that, could you tell us who the heck are you? What have you been doing for the last few years and what brought you to this juncture?
Yeah, so I'll give you a brief synopsis of me. I'm from the Midwest, from rural Minnesota, by far North Dakota. Went to college for journalism in Nebraska at the UNL, and moved to New York briefly, and then have been in Seattle for about 12 years. For people who've known me for a long time, I started in radio news. That was always my plan, to be in radio news. I worked for Cairo Radio, which is the CBS radio affiliate in Seattle, and I did long form investigative work. It was an interesting station because it was news, but you also had talk and opinion. So it was kind of an interesting balance. And then my contract was up, and a news director in Seattle at a TV station caught wind of that. And we had martinis, and she asked if I wanted to be on TV. And I said yes. And so I went over to what was known as Q13, but is now known as Fox 13 in Seattle. And I spent 7 years there. At the end, doing mostly political coverage. I was the political correspondent, and also hosted a show called The Divide for several years, a show that I started on social media that turned into a Sunday morning political program. And on Friday, a week ago today, I resigned.
Okay. And that's when you post the video. Well, first you said I quit my job, and then you had this video. So I'm assuming the video was already ready to go.
Yeah, I was putting some finishing touches on it, but I knew I was going to resign about a month and a half ago, and was laying the groundwork for launching this new independent product. And so actually very few people knew that I was going to leave Fox 13, including my colleagues. I had kept it, because things get out, so I'd kept it pretty close to the vest. And so a lot of them actually found out that Friday when I announced on social media I was resigning.
You have some love in the comment section, Brandi. She's awesome. You do have quite a following on Twitter, and I think what's been interesting. First off, I should just say, everybody go check out Brandi on Twitter too, at Brandi Kruse. Brandi with an I. I always get bugged when people spell your name wrong, because I'm Allison with one L, and I get it all the time. I really dislike Twitter. I'm Twitter, to me, oh gosh, I don't know. It's hard for me to engage there. Just, I don't know if it's like, I can't fit my words into the characters that are allowed there, or just how people talk on there. So tell me, what is it like to try to do journalism on Twitter as somebody who has attempted to do it? Because I don't think I did it very well.
Yeah, and I will note that Facebook, I think, is actually my more predominant platform, and has grown much bigger over the years. And I actually much prefer the engagement that I get on Facebook, and what I'm allowed to do on Facebook. As you mentioned, Twitter really limits you. You're limited in your words. You're also limited in the length of your video. It can only be 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So of the two platforms, I much prefer Facebook, although it has its issues as well, obviously. But Twitter was challenging. I often found myself getting into little Twitter battles with what I call the Twitterati in Seattle, like the 8 far left fringe bloggers who have a lot of influence at City Hall. And so Twitter was challenging for me. And there were moments in my career where I was like, I need to step away from Twitter, because I didn't find it to be productive. And then one day I just stopped caring about what people said about me on Twitter. And then Twitter got much more fun after that. But journalism's tough on Twitter. To me, mostly I would use it to break news. I mean, Twitter is kind of where news is broken these days. And so that would be, the predominant way I use Twitter. And then also when I was doing my show, The Divide, I would post little clips from the show on there, because they were very shareable. And so I did that. But again, I prefer Facebook to Twitter.
One of the things that I've noticed about your following on Twitter, and really just generally speaking, is that you have been able to amass an audience that crosses political boundaries. And I don't think necessarily Seattle is as conducive as maybe other places to conservative thought in the media. And you have been able to maintain an audience that is conservative, but still wants to hear what you say and feels like their voices are represented. I'm curious, how difficult was that? Oh, and you still have to tell me why you quit. So maybe we should get to that. Let's table that question. Why was it exactly that you're like, this was the last straw? What did it for you?
Well, the last straw was The Divide went away. The Divide is something that I started in 2016 during the presidential election, because things were getting so nasty and discourse was just down the toilet, and it was something I was passionate about. And so I started it. I got permission from my news director, who was awesome at the time, to start it as a little social media segment on my Facebook. And then after a couple of weeks, she moved it to our website. And then after a couple of weeks, moved it on air. And then 2 years ago, it turned into a Sunday morning 30-minute show that aired before Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace. And, in terms of, I lost track of the question. What was the question?
Why'd you quit? What was the last straw?
Oh, why'd I quit? Oh my God, that's why I'm here, right? And so when the divide went away, we had new Fox management that came in, and frankly, we had a disagreement about how the show would look moving forward, and about some changes to the show that that we obviously were not able to move past. And so I believe it was late September or maybe the very beginning of October, when it became clear to me that the divide was not returning to air, that was my passion. I didn't, being on the newscast is fine, but as you know, in TV news, the newscast can be so limiting. I mean, you've got weather and traffic and kickers and all of these things, and you're trying to do meaningful political coverage within that structure. It wasn't conducive to me doing my best work. The other thing I loved about The Divide is I had very little oversight, and I thought it was very unique to local TV news. We'd cover stories the mainstream media wasn't covering, that didn't get play in the local press. So that was my outlet where I felt like I could do the most meaningful work. When it went away, I no longer felt like I could do the types of stories that I wanted to do. So I knew instantly I was going to leave. And I just took some time. I was actually going to quit. I was actually going to walk away that day that I found out the show wasn't coming back. But I got some great advice from my agent and some friends in the business who just said, you know what, take a few days off, but let your emotional roller coaster, come to a stop, and then make a decision in a better headspace. And I was glad I did, because it gave me a month and a half to really get everything together for Undivided and to be able to launch it in a better way.
That's good advice. All right. I have never made a good decision when I'm emotional. So I think you did the right thing. So tell me this. Oh, I should let you know that that we are demonetized. This video, for some reason, has struck a chord with YouTube. I'm not quite sure. And so I have requested human review. But right now, for whatever reason, the AI has detected unsuitability for advertising on this video. And I didn't even mention any trigger word. So maybe Brandi Kruse is a trigger word now. I don't know. Okay, so my other question that I asked right before that was, what was it like trying to do a political show that represented a range of political viewpoints in a city that is very heavily blue? And was that difficult? How does one go about doing that successfully?
Yeah, it was really challenging because I'd be labeled right wing all the time. I can't tell you how many times I was called right wing by the Twitterati and bloggerati in Seattle. And, that's why I said this on my very first podcast for Undivided is people believe I'm conservative or Republican because I have a fairly substantial, especially on Facebook, conservative following, but I'm neither of those things. I am the person who I represented myself to be on TV for all those years. I am a moderate independent. And the show, The Divide, that I had was really about giving a voice to what I believe are the vast majority of Americans who don't identify with either political party. I don't identify with either political party. But of course, in Seattle, if you're right of Shama Sawant, the Socialist City Council member, you're right wing. And so that was really challenging for me because I felt very misunderstood. But it's also one of the reasons why I think my following skews right. Is because there weren't a lot of people in the press in Seattle who were willing to really challenge the prevailing progressive narrative. But, and this is one of the rationale I gave on my video as well. To me, and I had a problem with this a year ago, and I had said something about it on Twitter and got ganged up on by the mainstream media in Seattle, because the point I made is if you're doing more negative stories about Republicans in Seattle than you're doing about Democrats, you are failing at your job. We don't have any Republicans in power around here, at least not in the Seattle area, and certainly none that hold substantial leadership positions in the state. And so if you're concentrating all of your power as a journalist into doing negative stories about Republicans, you're not actually challenging those in power, because those in power are Democrats and progressives. And so that was an issue that I really found, people thought I skewed right because I was focusing on Democrats, but because Democrats are the ones in power. And so I got to a point where I really just stopped caring, how people were labeling me and just doing the stories that I thought were important. But I've also, as you'd mentioned, there's a lot of moderate Democrats in the city as well. And we saw that in this past election voters rejected a bunch of fringe, police abolitionist candidates and went with more moderate selections. And I do believe that there's a growing segment of the Seattle populists and politicos who want a little slight course correction. And so I've been able to, I think, maintain enough of a middle ground to get some viewers from the left and some viewers from the right. But yeah, being a reporter in Seattle who is willing to challenge progressives and reject just fringe ideas is a really tough place to live in as a reporter.
Julia says, may have to look at Patreon just to show support for Brandi. So thank you. That's it's got to be a little bit nerve wracking, is it, to be out on your own? We were having tech issues getting started. That's one of the things I struggled with, still do, because I live in the middle of nowhere in Eastern Washington, and so Wi-Fi is never consistent. And it's like I have the ability to do what I do because I live in a rural area, but I also have no ability to do what I do because I live in a rural area. It's like I'm damned either way. Is it nerve-wracking for you? What were some of the things that you were worried about, or still are dealing with that you didn't have to when you were in corporate news?
Well, the money was a big thing. I mean, I don't know if I can say what I was paid, but well into six figures. I think when I left, based on conversations I'd had with reporters, I was probably the highest paid non-anchor in the city. And so walking away, especially from my background, I grew up very poor. And so, as I started to make money in news, which not a lot of people get to that point where they feel like they're making good money and making a good living, being able to help my family a little bit and all of that was, I never thought in my wildest dreams I'd make what I was making in local news. And so walking away from that at the point where I finally felt financially stable, because I still spent many years as a journalist making absolutely nothing. And so that decision was really hard. I have a boyfriend I've been with for 3 years. We're obviously considering getting married and all those things. And so, I finally remember sitting down and having the conversation with him and trying to pitch him on leaving my job. And he was so supportive of it, and I'm glad, but I know in the back of his mind, he was really worried about it. So, the financial aspect of it, walking away from a good paying job with benefits, great 401k match, Fox took such good care of us when it came to the pandemic. That was an incredibly hard decision. But I will say the anxiety of that was eased a little bit. The support that I got on Monday was just above and beyond what I expected in the first couple of days. I'll have a good sponsorship that's starting next month. So the financials were part of it. But as you mentioned, the technology, I'm 33, but I am not the most tech savvy person. And so I've been really, it's sort of a learn as you go thing, in terms of platforms and what works and what doesn't. And so this week I got just a few hours of sleep and just trying to, not only respond directly to everyone who supported me financially. I wanted to make sure that I was responding to every message of support that came in, but also make sure I was getting content out there to show people what I was doing. And so, it's just a learn as you go thing. And I think the financials will always be scary to me. But the one thing I really love is there's no ceiling. The opportunities are unlimited. And, I am responsible for whether I sink or swim, that's all on me. And I actually like that. I prefer that. And I've got this 18-month goal for the show where I want to get into a full-fledged studio space in Seattle. I want to be able to hire some people, and I want to be able to put out a product that competes directly with the mainstream TV outlets.
Watch out. Watch out, Seattle News. She's coming for you. But now you have a global audience. What's funny is that when I quit, my last ditch effort was I pitched to my bosses to reformat my position to essentially close to what I'm doing now, make it digital, allow me to do longer form pieces, and to be more to have sort of just like a larger audience net, and to not just be so focused on Western Washington. And the reason I was doing that was because I had gotten to the point where I realized I could no longer in good conscience go on television every day acting as an authority when many days I felt like I didn't know what I was talking about because I did not have time. I just did not have the time and the resources. And I was somebody who was covering the environment every single day. So I got to really know my beat. But imagine, there's Brandi. We lost her. I'll just finish telling you guys my story. I felt like I was.
I can still hear you. I don't know if you can still hear me, but
Well, you went totally black on screen. Any idea what's going on?
No, but I'll fix it.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'll just keep talking. So, yeah, I would come back to work and to the newsroom and express my frustration that I'll put myself on full in case something weird happens. And Brandi, you, I don't know. I don't want to get any like stuff you don't want seen on the screen. So I'll just take you out for a second. So I one time came back and said that I was frustrated because I couldn't read a Senate report I really needed to read regarding the Clean Water Act in order to understand what I was talking about with the Clean Water Act. And my coworker said to just say what NBC says, because they usually get it right. That was the quote. And that was just not acceptable for me to feel like I was just repeating affiliate talking points, especially given the fact that I was probably one of the main experts in my field compared to, say, a reporter in New York City who had never covered the environment before. I just didn't trust that. It wasn't good enough for me to keep doing that. And so once I finally started seeing my blind spots, where I had to be in the news business for quite a while before I was realizing what I didn't know, I was just thinking to myself, there's no way that I could keep going on TV every day telling everybody that, well, I wasn't like saying I'm an expert, but I was, that was the subtext, is that here I'm an expert and I'm telling you what's going on. And so I joke that if we would just do our newscast saying, hey, thanks for watching the 5 o'clock news. This is the best we could do. Here's your first story. Like if we just said that, then I feel like that would be a lot more responsible given just the pressures under which I was working. A well-meaning journalist who really was going to work every day, I think with her heart in the right place, trying to do my best. I just could not cover complex topics responsibly. And so when I pitched the idea of changing my position so that I could do that, my bosses thought I was nuts. And that's why I left. So in your specific role, it's just funny because, you know, now we're going to be, I mean, maybe I already am and you are competing in the sphere that is going to continue to grow, which is the internet. And it was always surprising to me that my bosses were not more interested in cultivating that audience. Because you could grow it far beyond the DMA. You know, and the television signal. So you kind of went in that direction. You went from social media into TV. Did you ever ask them if they were willing to, like, say, do this show that you're doing now, but they would do it with you, or did you just not want to hand over the rights to it?
Well, I didn't, and you can see me now. Good. See, this is the tech issue we're talking about. So you get my behind the scenes shot.
Flawless.
By my closet. It's great. Yeah, first I'm using that.
You're ready for independent media.
What became clear is that the concept of the divide and what I wanted to do as a political show wasn't going to move forward. And there were some disagreements that happened behind the scenes that I don't know that I can get into. So it just became a place where I did not want to work anymore. And so, you know, working for them and doing a digital show wouldn't have been of interest to me either. And, you know, you bring up some interesting points about, you know, I got really lucky. I think I had a really good job in local TV. I did get time to look into things. I had been in the market for so long. So political stories, you know, there's a lot of institutional knowledge that I had built up to be able to go on air at a moment's notice and talk about what was happening politically in the city. But, you know, people ask me a lot whether, I think there's this misperception, and maybe you felt different. I'm curious to see if you felt different. I think a lot of people assume that we're kind of told what we can and cannot say. I will say for me, that was never the case. I never had a story that I pitched that they rejected or wanted me to cover in a different way. However, there is an element of self-censorship when you're in the mainstream media. There are a lot of stories I didn't even bring to the table, knowing that they probably wouldn't have a place on a mainstream newscast. And so I think that self-censorship is what this is going to let me get away from, because I'm not worried about, you know, getting canceled on the internet. I'm not worried about, you know, getting in trouble for something I say on TV, or, you know, a story that I do, or having a story get rejected. So I don't know if you experienced like self-censorship or actual like story rejection.
I have experienced both. And what the self-censorship side was more than anything towards the end was that I was just not going down the path of stories that were important, but they were complex because I knew I could not do justice to them. I just did not have the time and resources to do so. And I was no longer wanting to put myself in the position where I was presenting myself as an authority when I knew that I was full of SHIT. You know what I mean? At the end of the day. And so I remember one of the last stories where I just threw my hands up in the air and I thought, I just can't do this anymore. And not that this was a terrible story, but I just wanted to do more than this. Was a pizza restaurant that was switching from plastic bottles. And it's like, okay, you know, fine. I remember my boss going, live shot at 6 on the plastic bottles. And I'm like, really? You know, because here I was somebody who had spent months learning about the southern resident killer whales and what's happening with them in Puget Sound and all of the different variety of thought of why they're dwindling in number. I wanted to do stories that required mental energy and time and resource. And I did have one big investigation that I was allowed to work on, and I was really grateful for that. But the average day for me was really, I had a few hours to understand a complex topic, and I just did not feel comfortable anymore once I started realizing what I didn't know. And it took me a long time of learning things before I could even see my blind spots. Now, if I've always tell people, like in local news, if a reporter's got something, it's like somebody gets shot down the street and, or like there's a city council meeting or something, and you covering local politics and stuff. I think that's the value of local news. The problem is that when you start getting farther and farther away from the source, or it's a highly complex topic, science, health, you know, even politics can be that way, but the further you get away, so you're covering DC now, or you're covering something, a shooting that happens in another state, that's when it starts to get more difficult to do our jobs. That's when you start repeating wire services, or you know, you're just trying to fill time. At least that's what I witnessed. And you know, it's 90 seconds. So what harm could we do in 90 seconds? But I started realizing that I felt like I didn't feel like presenting myself in that even in that 90 seconds as if this was all there is, or you got the best that I could do. I don't know. I felt negligent in that part. And so I was censoring, not because of a political reason, like, oh, my bosses are not going to like this, but because I was thinking, I don't want to touch that topic anymore, because I just know I'm not going to feel like at the end of the day, I can present myself as some kind of authority on this topic. And then I just started doing stories that were just not interesting to me anymore. That's why I said, then I went to my bosses and offered changing my position, which would have also let me go move into an Airstream in the middle of nowhere. So there was some selfish aspect to it, but yeah, that just wasn't something that they were interested in. You know, I did have moments where I pitched a story and I had a boss say, no, that's crazy. I've talked about that on my channel. But that was much less frequent than self-censorship. So I think you bring up a good point. Let me ask you, back to your video, when you're talking about fringe ideas, dangerous ideas, can you give me some examples of what you mean by that?
Yeah, and this is a question I got. I'm going to talk about it on my podcast. I do a podcast as well for the show every Monday and Friday. And first, I also want to just say, you do deserve credit because you're an OG absconder. I mean, you quit your job in TV before it was cool to quit your job in TV. So good for you.
I've never been called an absconder before. That's absconder,
a great word. Yes, OG. In terms of fringe, so I've got asked this week a lot, is what do you consider anti-fringe? Because that has different meanings to different people. And of course it does. To me, a fringe ideology is someone who supports an idea or policy without care or concern for the possible consequences. So to me, defunding the police, for instance, people who go all in on police defunding or police abolition. And what I have found is they have little care or concern to discuss the possible consequences of doing so. You know, what's interesting is, I don't disagree with the idea of reimagining policing as an institution. I do believe that there are a lot of calls that police are sent to that you don't need them with their training to be sent to, or they're not the best equipped to handle. You know, we send, for instance, in Seattle police officers to more than 10,000 calls of people in crisis every single year. Like they're taking the place of a system that's failing for people who are mentally ill. And so I'm all for having a conversation about what does reimagining the police look like. But what is fringe to me is people who are demanding the abolition of our criminal justice system without any sort of replacement in place. So that's what I mean by fringe. You're supporting an idea or policy without a willingness to discuss or a care to discuss the consequences that could result from it.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. The reason I asked is because I think sometimes that term can be used by our old industry to label people that they don't want to deal with, or that bring up valid points, but do exactly what you said we should be doing as journalists in the video that you released, which is challenging that narrative. So it's an easy way to get rid of somebody's ideas sometimes, to just say like, that's just fringe, or that's anti this or that. Like you're anti-reality. If you're willing to ask questions about this, and depending on, like you said earlier, power differs depending on where you are. So you may be challenging power in one area and not in another by asking the same question could be just propaganda in one town, where it could be challenging a power structure in another, and it's a contextual thing. So I was just curious, because like I said, I hear that sometimes, like, the fringies, and I'm like, I don't know if that's fringe or if that's just something that you as the journalist don't want to contend with, you're not willing to explore, and so you label it in order to silence it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who engage in critical thought that are labeled as sort of fringe or conspiracists. Like the whole idea of COVID-19 starting in a laboratory was dismissed as fringe or conspiracist, right, until it wasn't, until the government had to be like, well, we're actually seriously contemplating this as a possibility.
And Brandi, what did you think about how quickly the script flipped with corporate news as soon as Fauci and the government were willing to allow for it? Because that was when I was just like, you're not seeing, it's not like the journalists were asleep and now they're like awake now. It's still the same. It's the same behavior. They're just going along touting the government line. It's just now the government allowed for us to talk about this, so now we can.
It was like stenography at its best. And that's my concern about where journalism is heading, is it's, stenography, like some journalists are just a middleman for the government. And at that point, why don't you just cut out the journalist and have the government run the news, And so it was really interesting. And what I would have liked to see from the press in that moment is a little bit of self-reflection, and people and, national talking heads and newspapers who really dismissed, and they did, all of them, who dismissed that possibility as conspiracy. They should have come back and said, look, we were wrong, did some self-reflection. Here's how we reported it before. And now the government's opening up the door to this. But instead, the headlines just changed. There was no acknowledgement that for months and months and months, they had dismissed this, because initially it came from Donald Trump, and they, didn't believe anything he said. And he lied a lot. I mean, let's be honest about Donald Trump. But that doesn't mean that you treat everything he says as a lie without any sort of critical thinking. And so, it was fascinating to me. And there was this really great Twitter thread I read where they had all the news agencies, the previous headlines and then the new headline, with no self-awareness about what they had engaged in the middle. So that was, I agree, a disappointing moment for the media, for sure.
Since you brought up Trump, what are your thoughts about how journalism changed during that administration? Do you think? Well,
there's some positives and some negatives, and I'll be, very blunt. I was not a fan of the former president. I was, and I can't remember what year did you leave, Allison?
2019 at the end.
Yeah. And so, that was a scary period for us, especially in Seattle. We were already targeted by anarchists, every single May Day, who hated the media, who would assault the media. So you had the, kind of far left fringe. And then all of a sudden we were, being verbally attacked on a daily basis by the fake news sort of narrative. And we had to upgrade our security system, and it cost a lot of money. And I was very annoyed with, what that did to, especially how it kind of trickled out to local news. Like local news and national news, I feel like are very different, but that fake news narrative really trickled down to us. And it was hurtful for anybody to dismiss, and harmful, I believe. It was like any news story they didn't like was fake news. It wasn't any news story it could be a factual news story that people didn't like was fake news. And that bothers me. But I do believe that it did lead to more critical analysis from the public about the press and about the stories that were being put out there. And people didn't just automatically believe that, it came from the media, it must be true. Because we know that's not the case. We just got done talking about that. And so I wish there had been kind of a healthy medium where, it wasn't people calling legitimate news stories, fake news, but it was, the American populace sort of shifting the way that they consumed the media and being a little more skeptical, because I believe a little skepticism is healthy. But that was a tough period. I just didn't like the way he talked about people and to people, and talked about the press. And, it's the same kind of thing for police officers and people who say like ACAB. I don't know. Can I say what that stands for? Can I say the B word on this stream?
Yes, you can. Yep.
All cops are bastards. And it's like, and what that did to police officers and their families who were fearful for their lives. And, for journalists to a lesser extent, because I don't think people were out like hunting us down, but it was not a fun period to go through. And I'd have family members who'd be calling like, are you okay? They'd see a lot of hate I got online. And so I have mixed opinions about what that period did when it comes to Americans in the press.
Okay. You are kind of famous for something that other people may not know, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, but weren't you the reporter that this Marine was protecting when he confiscated the gun from the guy who took it out of the police car?
Correct. Yes, this was my security guard.
Okay, I'm just gonna play this while you're telling us what happened here. This is him.
Yeah. So if you're not, this is interesting. So this guy's name is John. And, we had security all the time, and our security is armed, usually former military, which he is a Marine. I mean, not in the military anymore, but once a Marine, always a Marine. So it's funny because I got to the station that day and met who my guard was going to be, and he'd never been out to a protest with a news crew before. And I go, well, you're getting paired with the most difficult one, because I am a target at these events in Seattle. I have been for years, going back to the Occupy Seattle days when I did a story they didn't like. So I was like, you're in it. This is going to be an interesting day. And we got down there middle of the day. This is, I believe it was the end of May 30th. So this was in response to George Floyd. There was a riot happening in downtown Seattle, burning of police vehicles. But you see there's a police vehicle, mass looting in stores. And we were down there and we saw this police cruiser you see to his right there. We're kind of on a corner, just right kitty corner from this. And we see initially a guy. So I think this was the first one. Yes. So a guy reaches in the back, pulls out the gun that was in this SPD cruiser. And he's, you can tell that the kid has no idea what he's doing with this gun. And so my security guard tells us, stay here, with a lot of expletives, like points at us, like, you stay the F here. And we're on this corner and I'm hiding behind this sort of big potted plant kind of. And he goes over to rip the gun out of this guy's hand. And I had kind of turned the corner because I was very scared. This guy had a police rifle that I know they sit in the vehicles loaded. And so all of a sudden, security guard John comes back around the corner and he's disassembling this rifle. And to call 911, I'm on the phone with 911. I'm like, my security guard, he just disarmed a rioter of a rifle, and he has it taken apart and he's handed me the pieces. Because he hears screaming from that same street and this big crowd running. So he goes, I'll be right back. So I'm on the phone with 911. I've got this disassembled part of it. He's got another part of it slung over his shoulder. I can't tell this is the one. So he goes back and there's another police car, and another person has taken a rifle out of a police car. And this person is yelling, clear the block, clear the block. And this person, which this first one played out live on Como News, but the second one did not. And this guy, the block clears, that's why people are running, and he starts to fire it into the police cruiser that he stole it from. And so that's when my security guard, there's some other videos on social media where you see him armed, and he's like, drop the weapon, drop the weapon, drop the weapon, and goes over there and takes it from this kid as well. And so now we've got 2 stolen SPD rifles in our custody, and we're like part of the story, whether we like it or not. And he becomes John. So if you want to follow him, he's now dubbed the Weapon Snatcher, and he started sort of this whole social media thing over it, and he does a lot of cool stuff in that community. He's just a great guy. In fact, he reached out to me yesterday to ask how he could help with my new endeavor. He's just an awesome dude. And so he is now the Weapon Snatcher, and he's awesome. Yeah.
I've talked to him a couple of times. So I was trying to get him on, and it was back when this all happened. I think he was too busy, so I should probably reach out again. Doesn't he also go by Shooter Rugi, I think, online?
Yep, he does Shootarugi, and that's kind of what he was before. And he blew up overnight. I
Yeah.
mean, over this. And at first, people thought he was an undercover cop. And actually, the scariest part of this whole ordeal, people never saw, because all the rioters started to surround us because they thought that we were police. And I had my mask on and a hat on. And so I wasn't like readily identifiable. And I was terrified in that moment. And police weren't coming to us. We had their guns. And that was a scary. And then, of course, like 2 days later, my crew was mobbed at CHOP, which has been seen a bunch of times as well. And so it was a rough week for me. It was a rough week in news.
I would love to just talk to you about what it was like covering May Day and just share experiences with each other and all that good stuff. But okay, I want to ask you about this article that just came out in the Daily Mail. Crime-ravaged Seattle is now so dangerous it can no longer protect its own workers. Security guards are hired to walk county staffers to station or ferry, but you're on your own if you work in the private sector. Is there truth to this? What's happening here?
You know, I haven't heard about the security guards to walk county staffers to places. I'd have to make a call on that. But I do know a lot of private sector businesses have also hired security guards. Look, the reality is Seattle police have lost 300 plus officers over 2 years. The exodus really started when the city council was talking about defunding the department. And I mean, look, at 50%, if somebody was telling you at your company that they were going to defund it by 50%, you would leave, right? Because there's no job security there. You might get laid off. And so you had officers just leave. The climate's terrible. Response times, this will tell you everything you need to know. If you call 911 in Seattle right now and you have a life or death emergency, like let's say you just got shot or something, or somebody's attacking you in progress, it on average in 2021 is taking 10 minutes for police to get there. Imagine waiting 10 minutes when you are in a life or death situation. That's the difference between life or death for people, which is, 10 minutes is unacceptable.
So it says here, King County's new, quote, walking bus will debut on November 15th and see council workers based in downtown Seattle and nearby Pioneer Square escorted to a nearby train station and ferry terminal each evening before being left to continue their commute home. Then an announcement on King County's official website says King County is launching a walking bus pilot program where county employees can join their colleagues and a facilities management division security escort each evening, walking to the King Street station and the Coleman dock from the downtown campus. So
that's ridiculous. And that's what I talk about a fringe ideology like defunding the police, where you don't consider the consequences. People deserve to be able to go to work, walk to work, take public transit, and feel safe.
All right. I am going through just some of the questions before we wrap. I know you got to go. Is there anything else that we did not discuss that you would like to talk about? Anything about where people can find you besides what we already promoted?
Yeah, definitely. My goal in the first week was 2,000 patrons on Patreon. So if you'd like to join, I would love that. Although most of my content's available for free on Patreon. It's patreon.com/undivided. And I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. If you want to see my dog pictures, I am on Instagram, although that's about all I post on my Insta.
I'm trying to find, one of the comments was that everybody liked you because you asked tough questions. I think at the end of the day that what frustrates people is that, like you said earlier, that there tends to be safe zones for journalists, and the public doesn't live in those areas necessarily. That they want other questions asked of especially the government. And I don't know what got us to this point, but it does seem like there's more and more comfortable relationship there, whether it's taking a press release and repeating it without necessarily really asking if this is true, or what is the incentive of the government for sending out this press release? Why do they want us to repeat it? And that there are certain people that are safe people to attack, but other people get kid gloves. And I think just perusing my comment section, it more and more seems like the public feels like they're not represented in the questions and the accountability of what journalists do anymore. That It's almost like journalists have become their own elite class and have left the American people behind.
Yeah, like they know best. And to me, in what I said at the beginning of my video, and why I think the genesis for this was a long time coming, we are living in one of the most important times for journalists in American history. You have government not only at the federal level, but at the local level and everywhere in between that is making decisions that have a direct and profound impact on people's lives, from their livelihoods to their health. The only recourse that most individuals have for questioning that power or demanding accountability is us. And I have seen too many people fall short of that. It's one thing, I think, for instance, people confuse questioning a vaccine mandate with questioning vaccines. And it's not the same thing. We ought to question the government when they're telling people you're going to lose your job if you don't get a shot. We ought to be doing that, even if we agree with vaccines personally or masking personally. It doesn't matter how we feel about it. We have to question exertion of government power, no matter who's holding it. And I really, really believe in that. And so I think the media would do well to get back to that premise.
Okay, my last question, since you're a political expert and I have the chance to ask you, I have really run out of language to describe what I'm noticing, and I'm wondering if you have vocabulary for it. It seems like, I guess the easiest, maybe, though, like I said, I don't think that really captures the public spirit right now in the way that I want to, but would be populism. But I noticed that I have people who would be, I guess you would consider them on the left, and then people on the right, but they agree on quite a bit. And I don't think I would label them centrist in the sense that they're the center sort of neoliberal, neocon, Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi types. They don't like either one of those people. And they seem to be aligned on like working class, civil liberties, and regaining, I guess, the rights of people. And maybe it's not even rights, or not necessarily, it would be always the right word, but the freedom and capacity of the average person to live a life that's not controlled by a big corporation that's getting backroom deals from the government, and basically they're just all working together to screw the little guy. That's what I get a sense from, and I don't feel like left and right encapsulates that well at all anymore. But I don't have the words for it. What do you think is going on, and how do you talk about it?
It's sort of a libertarian tendency. And what I think is interesting about the Libertarian Party, and I don't think it matches perfect, because they also believe in things like legalizing drugs, which I think most people, especially people who consider themselves moderate, are against. But the interesting thing about libertarians is my sister, who's she lives in Miami. I mean, she's like a bougie hippie, but like she considers herself a libertarian. And then you have people who are closer to conservative ideals, who also consider themselves libertarian. But libertarians is basically the most limited possible government intervention in our lives. And I think that that's a result of the pandemic and people being under government control in such a profound way for 2 years. So I do think you're going to see an increase in popularity for the libertarian movement. But I think more and more people are realizing that the party system is a business. And I talked about this in one of my first segments. It's the reason that the state Democratic Party supported a police abolitionist candidate to be the next city attorney in Seattle, is because the opponent was a Republican. And it is not good business if the Republican wins, even though the Republican was obviously the less dangerous candidate. And so I think more and more people don't identify with either major political party for sure, and just want reason. They just want common sense. And I would like to see people totally remove themselves from the party affiliation and what that means in terms of the party as a business and as a corporation, because I think it would be a lot healthier in terms of getting the best ideas out there for Americans.
Okay, I actually have one other quick question. Can I ask you?
Yes.
Okay. By the way, have you heard of locals?
I have, and I get a lot of questions about why I'm not on locals. And I was contacted by locals this morning asking, why are you not on locals?
See, you got to get on locals. AlisonMorrow.locals.com. Everybody head over there. And when Brandi's there, I will definitely link you to her and promote her. So what I do on my locals platform, which is really one of the the best uses, I think, for it is it's kind of like Facebook meets YouTube. So you can post your videos there. You don't have to worry about them getting wiped. But you can also post articles other people can post, so you can get story ideas from them and you can hear what they want and they can direct message you. And it's just it's more of a community, I think, than Patreon and a lot of their platforms. It's a top-down model, and Locals is a little bit more organic like that. But I posted that I was going to be talking to you, and so I got some questions from people. That's what I do. So everybody, and I also do editorial board meetings on Saturday morning. So I look at Locals like an editorial board. We meet on Saturday mornings and I get story ideas and feedback from the week before. It's fun. So if you want to join my editorial board, go over to allisonmorrow.locals.com. Gregory asked, can you ask Brandi what it was like to work in a newsroom in Seattle and how issues were discussed internally and how decisions were made in presenting stories in a certain way?
Yeah, so I'll be transparent with that. I signed a separation agreement that precludes me from discussing anything that's proprietary, and that would include how stories are selected. That was the price I had to pay for getting out of my contract 2 years early. But I will tell you, it's just, we have, a couple meetings a day, and there's conversations about what stories to do and not do. And there's, it weighs heavily on who our viewer base is. And I think that's one thing about mainstream media is they're driven very heavily by not only the ratings, but the makeup of their demographic, which they have a lot of information on. So, the decisions about stories are being made in concert with, one, is this a good story? And then two, is it a good story for our particular viewer base? So I think that's about all I can say. I wish I could say more, but the only way I can be here doing this right now is because I signed that agreement. So I better not violate it.
Okay. Okay. Another person asked, what do you think about the best approach to talk to people who still have absolute belief in their news source?
The best approach to talk to people who have absolute, like in their mainstream news source?
I think that's what this person means. Meaning if you're talking to somebody who you're debating a particular point, they're like, but CNN says, or Fox News Channel says, how do you talk to them about, or what do you think would be good points to make to allow that person maybe an opportunity to question why they give such credence to their particular favored corporate news source?
One thing I would just encourage, or you can ask people is, if you're watching something that you always find yourself agreeing with and never makes you uncomfortable, you're probably not watching news. The nice thing about media, I guess, is you can always go somewhere that fits your worldview perfectly. But, ask yourself whether it's challenging your worldview at all, because it's not news and it's not helpful to you as a human to grow if you agree with every single thing that you're watching, like be it a CNN or a Fox News. So I would just ask them and really challenge them. And this is, for instance, when you have one party rule in Washington, why I don't believe that it results in the best ideas, because you don't have any challenge there. Democrats have control of everything. And so when there's no other challenge to those ideas, I don't believe it can make the ideas as good as they can be. And it's sort of the same thing. And what else I would say, and challenge people to try watching something else, is it can also help you solidify your own belief system. I don't believe that you can actually be solid and confident in your beliefs unless you have had them challenged in a meaningful way. So let's say you watch CNN, try watching Fox for a week. You might find some new things, for instance, that you like, or it might solidify how you actually feel about views and about ideas and about policy.
That was the one I read you. Brandi, well, how has legacy media changed in your tenure? Is there any pushback from within to restore the tenet of journalism? I don't know what that tenet is. Or has legacy media gone past the point of no return?
Well, one of the challenges right now that legacy media has to contend with is staffing. Just like everybody else during the pandemic, there was a mass exodus for a variety of reasons. And newsrooms have shrunk substantially. And I would challenge you to do this. Go watch whatever local news station is in town, usually an hour of news, and ask yourself at the end of it what you came away with, what you remember from the newscast. My guess is it's not going to be an awful lot because they just don't have the resources dedicated to doing really meaningful, in-depth stories and questioning people in power and investigations. And so that's, I think, right now, the biggest challenge of legacy media is how do they adapt, one, to the changes that people have and how they consume news, but two, how do they continue to put out, or how do they return to putting out some meaningful stories when they have such low staffing?
Okay, I really am going to let you go, but I'm going to ask you one more question. Because I have you here. So I like asking people that were in in the corporate journalism world, this question, because again, it's a genuine question. I don't quite have an answer for it, but it has appeared to me that over, say the last, I don't know, 4 to 6 years, that we went from a profession of seeking to understand contrarian viewpoints to seeing our job as silencing them. So in other words, like this whole idea of misinformation, you're a misinformation spreader, like cheering censorship. I see some of my old coworkers cheering when people are deplatformed, not really questioning what could potentially go wrong with a massive corporation pressured by the government silencing speech. What do you think about that phenomenon of journalism being seen now as the gatekeeper that's silencing people, and cheering on the deplatforming of voices that I guess we decide the public shouldn't be hearing for their own good?
Well, I think we have to be honest about the fact that the majority of people in the media do lean left. And so there is definitely a prevailing viewpoint in corporate media. And that's very obvious. It has been like that, I think, increasing over time. But also, the media is, I think, a victim of the cancel culture sort of mentality. No reporter wants to be attacked on social media. No reporter wants to be labeled, X, Y, or Z. And so I think it has scared them in a way into challenging things because they don't want to get the pile on. They don't want to get canceled. They don't want to get attacked. And so I think the media in large part, because I hear from reporters who I'll do a story on something, challenging the mayor on, vaccine mandates. And I'll get reporters in town who will send me messages like, great interview. But then they're not doing the same kind of stuff, in their job. And I wonder why. And I think it's maybe they're not as equipped or mentally equipped to deal with the backlash from that. I've been dealing with backlash for a long time. So to me, I give zero, what. So I think that's part of it. I really think they need to get back to not being so reactionary and not caring so much. You shouldn't be catering your media to an audience. You should be doing the stories, using your journalistic integrity to do stories that are thoughtful, that have critical analysis, and then putting them out into the world and come what may. But I do believe that there's just too much catering to an audience for media to be authentic.
Okay, I just showed one comment that said Brandi talks fast. She just gets a lot of information in a quick period of time, which is what you're going to sign up for when you go support her at patreon.com/undivided. And I vote to have you both team up on a regular basis. You're both just the best. And I hope you will come back when there's stuff to talk about, especially as it relates to politics and all the insanity of Seattle, Brandi, because it's really been a joy to talk with you. And I am really excited for you. If there's anything I can do to help you out, whether it's tech stuff, my husband's very good at helping with backgrounds and wires and cables. My dog and toddler are also very good at destroying things. I call my toddler my producer. So my gift to you is that whatever it is that is most likely to sabotage your show, you should just name it something fun. And then that way the audience is very excited whenever it makes an appearance, if it's your cat or something else. Just have fun.
I love that. Well, I had my first technical mishap on here, so okay. I appreciate you giving me the leeway to have a technical issue. And to that commenter, I will attempt to talk slower. I do talk very fast. I've been told that a lot. But I got a lot. You're right. I got a lot I want to get out.
I don't think you talk. I don't think you talk fast. I thought you talked normal. But then again, I used to work in TV news, so I'm used to my brain getting back to warp speed. But I do think one thing I had to unlearn, which you may not have to because you weren't an only TV news person. You had a background in other types of media, is that the independent world seems to, they want more, I don't know, just longer form, not polished necessarily. It's nice when your Wi-Fi works. In my particular case, I like that. But no, I don't think anyone really cares when you have stuff like your toddler makes a noise or your cat makes an appearance, stuff that we would maybe freak out about in a TV newsroom. I think people, I don't know, the sort of behind the scenes unpolished look, I think works in this world. So I just think you should have fun with it, and you're doing what you love to do, and you're continuing on, and now you're your own boss, and that's a great thing to celebrate. So all the best to you.
Well, I really appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on. And I need to have you on to talk about what happened with your job, because I've gotten a lot of emails like, you need to have Allison Morrow on. So we'll arrange a time to do that as well.
Totally. Yeah. Happy to do that. Okay. The press has never been authentic. The First Amendment is so that everyone has the right to grind their axe. I don't know. I think you got to go, as we were talking about, it's a case by case thing. I think they're in any profession, professions are compiled of people and people are fallible. That's why I think it's just really important to present yourself for what you are, which is, like I said, that was what ended my career. Cause I felt like, you know what, to do my job responsibly, I need more time. I need more resources. And I didn't feel comfortable with it. But, there are other people who I think are doing a good job. I don't think we should, in other words, I guess is just to say, I don't know what you think about this, but right now, a lot of people I can understand don't trust the government. A lot of people don't trust doctors even, or scientists. There's a lot of distrust with establishment or sort of institutional knowledge. And I can completely understand why people feel that way, but I think it's an incorrect overreaction to just then say everybody in this world is a that, because it's the opposite side of the I trust everyone in that world coin. It's really kind of, in my opinion, it's the same structure of looking at it, where we should really be looking at individuals. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I agree. Critical thinking is great to an extent, but don't exhaust yourself overanalyzing every little thing. Some things are what they seem. So,
okay. Thank you, Brandi. Thanks everybody for watching. Go check out Brandi. You're on YouTube too?
yes, I'm on YouTube. Just started my YouTube page on Monday. So it's also Undivided with Brandi Kruse.
Okay. Brandi with an I. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. And
Thank you.
I think tomorrow I'm going to be live with Michael Yon on the Texas-Mexico border. So that should be fun. Different topic, but we'll see you then.